Hey there, everybody, and a very happy Thursday to you today. For all of my American friends across the pond, I wish you a very happy Thanksgiving and would ask that you today, please, for me, have an extra piece of pumpkin pie. That is impossible to get here in Germany, and that is the one food that I'm really missing from the Thanksgiving table. So if you would do that for me and enjoy it for me too, please. So today I wanted to share with you a Christmas card design, and this is one featuring a very traditional color combination, very traditional motif with the nice big Santa on there. This is from a Hunkydory stamp set, and I've done just some really simple coloring on here using my distress crayons. So I'm going to share that with you as well today too. So just a quick look at the card. It's a very simple design. It's one that you should be able to produce quite quickly. So if you're doing an assembly line style of Christmas cards, this is a good one to keep in mind. So as I mentioned, the stamps are from Hunkydory. So this is their For the Love of Stamps. It's the Santa Claus collection. And you can see the Santa is, of course, the main focal on here. You're also getting some nice accent elements here too. The Santa Claus is coming to town, some postmarks, that holly that's really pretty, the believe word over here, and then some extra swirls and things. Now the size of the Santa, I knew somebody would ask, so I wrote it down. He is 4 3/4 from top to bottom, and then 3 1/4 inches wide from the pom-pom to the side of his beard. So he's a nice large focal element for your cards, and then you have lots of nice other accent pieces on there as well. So I'm going to share some tips with you on getting a good stamped image with a large stamp. And you can color him with any medium that you want. I had not been using my distress crayons for a while, so I thought I should get these out and have a little play with them. And these are a lot of fun. Of course, you can use any medium for this card, but the distress crayons are really cool. So if you haven't seen these before, they come in sets like this. I've got a couple, as you can see, and I'm mixing and matching between the sets, so you can definitely do that as well. Okay, so I'm going to stand up and tilt you down, and then we can take a look at the stamping and the coloring process. So let me get you tilted down here. If you hear any crinkling in the background, that is one of my cats. She's sleeping in a box of newspaper, so we may hear her crinkling around. That's Shadow. Okay, so another quick look at the card itself, and I think you can see the shading on here. I've really only used a couple of colors, and I've done a little bit of blending with some water and also with a water brush. So I'm going to share that process with you. But first, let's stamp our great big Santa Claus. And I mentioned he's a nice substantial size, which means that I find it much easier to stamp using a stamp positioner. So I'm working with my Misty. Because I'm going to be using a watery medium, always go for a permanent ink. So this is the Ranger Jet Black Archival. This is a great standard ink to have on hand. And I've got a lot of magnets on my stamp positioner to really hold down this cardstock. And I'm using a smooth white cardstock for this, so nothing textured, because he does have a lot of detail on his beard. So when I close this up, you'll see that I've positioned the magnets to be pretty close to the stamp itself, and that just helps to hold down the cardstock when I'm lifting this back up. So I'm just going to ink him up, and I'm going to really press this ink pad on here because he is so detailed that I want to make sure to get all of those details. Very often, especially with a large or a very detailed stamp, I like to do 2 passes with the positioner. Always making sure, of course, that you're getting lots of ink into that center section. And then I'm just going to close this up and press. And large stamps require an extra bit of attention, so I'm going to press this down. Generally, I stand when I stamp, but I'm going to stay sitting for the video. And there we go. So I've got him in 1 pass, and he looks great. I will add one little tip. Just before starting this video, I had to re-ink my ink pad. So that's another thing to kind of keep in mind as well. If you're not getting a perfect impression, you may want to add a little bit of extra ink to your ink pad with a re-inker. So here he is, ready to be colored. And the colors that I'm going to work with initially, I'm going to start out, I'm using the antique linen for his face, and then I'm going to add a little bit of rosiness to his cheeks with the festive berries. This is also what I use on his hat. And then for shading around on his beard, I'm going to be using hickory smoke. Now I'm also mixing these with water. So I've got my water mister on hand, and I have a couple of water brushes. You can use small paint brushes for these as well. I'm using water brushes because this is kind of my go-to. I'm going to be working onto my craft sheet, and I'm going to start with the lightest color, which is the antique linen. And I'm just going to scribble some of this onto my craft sheet. I know it's quite light, so it's a little bit hard to see. So I'll add some of the festive berries so you can see that a little bit better. So you can tell from the tool itself that it is kind of like a lip balm almost. You have a twisty barrel at the bottom, and that can extend more of that pigment color. So these are a lot of fun. You can use them straight onto cardstock like this. You can color just like that. You can then blend a little bit with your finger. You can also use a baby wipe to blend some of this out too. So if you want to get a little bit more color on there. These also work well. This is an uncoated cardstock or a matte cardstock. This can also produce some really interesting techniques using stencils and on a coated or maybe even a painted surface too. So lots of fun that you can use with these, but we're going to use them in a pretty simple way today. So let me grab my paintbrush or my water brush. And the first thing I'm going to do is add a little puddle of water up here. And I'm just going to pick up some of the water with my brush and get a little bit of that antique linen. And I'm just going to put a little bit of color into his face. Doesn't need a whole lot, but you can see there just to give him a little bit of a tint. And then I'm going to mix a very light bit of that red with some of the antique linen just to give him some rosy cheeks. You don't want to overdo it, but you can add a little bit around here just to give him some color. So there, he's already got a little bit of color in his cheeks and he is ready to go. Now that I've used my light color, I can work a little bit more into the reds because of course I need to add some red onto his hat. So I'm going to start down here and just basically paint this in. You can see that with a little bit of water, I've got a nice watercolor effect. Oops, I've gone outside the lines. A watercolor effect on here. Now what I can do is come back and add some detail with a little bit of a darker color. So just come around the top of that fur on his cap. Ooh, rustle, rustle, there goes shadow. And get a little bit more detail on here so that I can get some shading. And I'm really only following the lines that are drawn on the stamp itself. I'm going to come along here. Maybe I want a little bit more up there as well. And now what I can do is come in and add some detail to his beard. Now, he could be finished as he is. I think he's ready to go, really. But if you want to add a little bit of shading down here on his beard, this is where the hickory smoke is going to come in. So this is a really nice gray, a really pretty gray. And I thought about using black, but it really was too harsh. So I thought the gray would be a nice compromise. So I'm just going to clean off the brush and get a little bit more of that water. And in this case, I'm really just once again working around in some of the sort of designated areas and just kind of adding a little bit of shadow in some of those areas where it's darker or where there's a little bit more of the tracing line. So you can see that I've come along this area and along here, really kind of creating a shadow effect. I'm going to go under his mustache and up on his eyebrows too, and also kind of scuffling along in the fringe of the fur of his cap. So you can see you don't need a whole lot of the crayon to really get a nice impression here. I'm going to add a little bit more to my craft sheet. And you can also, if you don't have a craft sheet, you can also do this on like a glass mat, if that's what you work on instead. And come along here, give him a little bit more definition on his pom-pom and around in some of these areas too. So now I've got some shading and I've got a little bit of shadowing effect on here too. Now, I realized I forgot his mouth, so let's get a little bit more of that red, and then we can give him a mouth too. There we go. Just something quite subtle. So there we have our painted in image. So quick and easy to do. Now I've also got the stamped holly as well. And so for this, once again, I'm going to get some of that red and just color that in with the brush. Again, you can make it as intense as you want to. And then I'm going to be using 2 of the greens for the actual holly leaves. So I've got Twisted Citron, which is a nice, bright, cheerful green, and then the peeled paint, which is almost an olive green. Same approach, scribble this on here. And I'm going to be mixing the 2 of these, so I'm not too terribly concerned about how close they are and how much they blend. Now for this one, let's see, clean off my brush a little bit here and pick up, let's start with that Twisted Citron, that nice bright, kind of a spring green. And I'm just going to paint this in, just as I did before, kind of a scribbling motion. And I'm going to be using the peeled paint as my accent. And with these stamps, you've got a lot of nice guidance on where to add shadows and highlighting. You could leave it like this if you wanted to, but I'm just going to come back with some of the peeled paint and add a little bit of a shadow effect. So this is the one that I've done the shadow on, and I think you can see that. I'll try and do this mid-air for you. So kind of go along there. And you can see it does add some depth to it. It's not absolutely necessary. So if you're in a hurry or if you only have the one color, maybe you want to skip that. But I like to add just a little bit of definition on here. I think it adds something to it. Okay, and then I've got my holly done. Now, I hand cut this out, so it's a little bit of a fussy cut to go around those leaves. I would really suggest if you have some nice sharp scissors that will definitely come in handy. So here once again is the card design. So I've simply mounted him up onto some craft cardstock and onto red. Now I tore the bottom edge here because I thought it would just add a little bit of extra dimension to the card. I inked the around the outside edges with that same black, and then just wrapped this with some twine and popped it down onto the front of my card. Now because the twine is a little bit bulky, I put it on foam tape, and then that way you don't have your cardstock piece sort of bowing over the dimension of that twine, and I think the twine adds a nice touch to it too. So the Santa Claus has been stamped and then die cut with a simple oval, and I have my holly down here overlapping a little bit there as well. So here is your quick and easy and hopefully inspiring Christmas card design with Hunkydory and with Distress crayons. So I hope you enjoyed. Again, have a lovely Thursday. Again, have a very happy Thanksgiving to my American friends and those who are celebrating today. Don't forget to have that extra piece of pie for me. And I will catch you again next week. One last little bit of information to add, though, if you are enjoying the videos, please do stop by my website at saranaumann.com and you can sign up for my email newsletter. I send it out every Thursday and it always provides links to tips and techniques and make sure that you don't miss any of the Facebook Lives or blog posts. So that's over at saranaumann.com and you'll see the email newsletter for that. Okay, thanks again, you guys. I will see you next week. I hope you have a fabulous week and weekend. Take care.